had Nikki come?
She came about
So,
3 years ago,
She
and I
did.
was
Okay.
thinking it might
all
be
right,
time again.
great. So, yeah, let's get going. Welcome to Coffee with a Purpose, everyone. This is actually our last Monday session before August break, and we're happy to have with us our guest this morning, Ron Hoffman from Compassionate Care ALS. Bill Ramage has brought Ron to us this morning to talk about his organization, his role in it, what it does. Ron, we usually like to start with very brief introductions of the other folks on the call, just so you have a sense of who's in the audience. So let's move forward with that. You know Bill. Bill, do you want to say anything else? Or
Uh, no, well, other than my son-in-law has ALS, and Ron's organization has been incredibly supportive and helpful in that transition that he's going through. So I'm delighted to see you and meet you and hear more about your organization, Ron. So thanks for coming.
Yeah.
thanks, Bill, and thanks for sharing that. And we're sorry about that. Kathleen.
Hi, good morning, Ron. I'm Kathleen Donovan. I'm on the Library Board of Trustees here at Natick, and I'm also an active member of Keep Natick Beautiful. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Kathleen. Martin.
Hi, I'm a basic active person around town, not quite so active over the last year. I've been suffering from some illnesses, but still quite interested in what's going on in Natick, and living in South Natick in the midst of the Bacon Library and the dam reconstruction, which is kind of a interesting place to be these days.
It sure is. Yeah. Thanks, Martin. Cindy.
Hey, good morning, Ron. Thank you for coming. I'm a 6-year resident of Natick. I'm Keep Natick Beautiful volunteer and a trail steward, and I sing in sound and spirit.
Thanks, Cindy. Carol, good to see you.
Yes, good morning, Ron. I'm Carol Berkowitz, and I've lived in Natick over 50 years and very proud to be a resident of Natick. It's a great place.
Thanks, Carol. Carrie.
Hi, good morning. I'm a newbie, 23 years in Natick, treasurer for Keep Natick Beautiful, Natick Rotary. Like Bill, not in the same vein, but I had a dear friend that I knew who contracted ALS, and I was one of the few people that she really allowed to be in her presence her last weeks or so. It was just a pain to see the demise. It's just a horrible disease. So yeah, so I'm look forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. Pat.
Yes, good morning. Pat Conaway. Keep Natick Beautiful.
Good to see you, Pat. Cindy. Cindy, we got your video
I
off.
think we did.
Oh, did we do Cindy?
Didn't we do Cindy?
Maybe. How about Sally? Sally? Sally might be away from the computer. Okay. Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah. Interested in all things Natick, and I know this isn't specifically Natick, but I'm interested in lots of other stuff too. So looking forward to what you have to say.
Thanks. Brinley.
Yes. Good morning.
We're doing introductions.
Oh, good morning.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm Brinley. I've lived here for 26-ish years. I have a couple kids, active in lots of things Natick. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Brinley. And I'm Doug. I convene this group, longtime Natick resident, volunteer in the local church. And yeah, Ron, we're so glad to have you spend some time with us this morning and provide some education, both about the disease, but about what your organization is doing. So I will turn it over to you. However you want to handle things, whether you want to present first, take questions after, or take questions during. We try to use the raise hand feature. You can share your screen if you've got slides. So the floor is yours.
Sure. Yeah, feel free to interrupt, raise the hand. I've got no slides.
Okay.
Technology isn't my thing. You know, like old school, it's technology in many ways to me kind of gets in the way. But
Yeah.
yeah, that said, Bill, nice to see you. I've been doing this work for nearly 30 years now.
Wasn't something I looked for. Uh, I moved to Massachusetts in the spring of '88. Um, I grew up in the South, pretty much lived across the country, had many careers, and moved here, like I said, in the spring of '88. Had the opportunity to open up some retail stores, which I did. I had family here. That's what brought me up this way. Closed my stores in, I guess it was 1990. Recession kicked in and things were really hard. So I just stopped. Didn't know what I was going to do. My girlfriend was a massage therapist, so she encouraged me to give that a go. So I did. And as I was going to school, a friend of mine said, Ron, there's a catering company, big party, Neiman Marcus, Boston, 500 people. They need hands. Okay. So I meet the chef, his to-be wife, and we got along. I could walk and chew gum at the same time. And they invited me to show up at Wicker Tree Catering in Falmouth, Mass, that summer. And so I worked part-time there in the early 90s through spring of 97 when I was there. And the owner, a man named Gordon Heald, walked in and didn't really know Gordon that much. And he had been in the catering business for a long time. And his speech was a little off. We just figured he'd been drinking a little early that day. But after several days, we realized something was amiss. And his wife, Betsy, came in. A few days later, I reintroduced myself to her and just let her know the staff was nervous. And she said, thank you very much, and that Gordon had been diagnosed with ALS. Well, I didn't know much about ALS, but, this is who I am, where I've been. If I could be of any help, feel free to let me know. A few days later, she comes in and said, would you mind driving Gordon, during the week when you're here? I said, okay, can I ask why? And well, Gordon used to get a lot of speeding tickets. And Gordon, which I would later find out, had bulbar onset where he completely lost his speech. Everything else he was fine. He just couldn't talk. And she was afraid that, he would get pulled because he used to get a lot of speeding tickets. And, so I said yes. And he said yes. I just started driving him, became his driver. And then after several weeks of that, my phone rang around 1:32 in the morning. It was Gordon laughing. And I said, I'm guessing you need me to come over? He goes, uh-huh. Betsy was at their home in Weston. Gordon was here at their summer house here in Falmouth. So I get out of bed, get over to the house, find the keys, let myself in, didn't see him anywhere, find my way to the bedroom, and there he was on the floor. He had gotten out of bed, fell, couldn't get up. So got him squared away. He was fine. I let Betsy know the next morning what happened, and she kind of freaks out over the phone and says, would you move in with us? Excuse me? I mean, it's not like I knew these folks, right? And she said, would you move in with us? I said, we'll move in where? Well, wherever we are. And do what? Help me take care of Gordon. Now, Gordon was 6'4". Betsy was maybe 5 feet tall, right? So literally on the phone, I'm thinking to myself, all right, no wife, no dog, I'm available. Okay. So literally that's how all of this started. I did not go to school for this. This wasn't in my grand scheme of things in my life. So literally I just became Gordon's caregiver. I actually became his assistant because he was still functional and he was a businessman. He had lots of interests. And, as time went on, it's like, how are people doing this? So this is 1997. There were only, to my knowledge, 2 ALS organizations at the time, the ALS Association, along with MDA, muscular dystrophy. We would get information, we would look at it, and Gordon would pretty much throw it in the trash. It was pretty much booklets of different pieces of equipment, not what you need it for, not where do you find this. And Gordon was just, I don't want to see any of this. And I would look at it and say, what's missing here? There needs to be a different way. Seed was planted in my mind. How do you do this? Not that I knew what that way was, but seed planted. Gordon had a very fast progression. ALS can look uniquely different. About a month before he passed, I had the idea in my mind and sat with him and Betsy, presented the idea, would you be interested in doing a fund in your name? And Gordon was like, I said, well, before you say, yeah, what is it you want to do? There's research and there's care. I was interested in care, but they were going back and forth. And literally, I was sitting there, this isn't looking really well. Had they said research, I wouldn't be here. Everybody does research. I was interested in people because, you know, in attending to and caring for Gordon and meeting other ALS families is like, how are people navigating this? So fortunately, they said, let's help folks. So with that, we created the Gordon T. Heald ALS Fund, also known as Ron's Lemonade Stand. We just created something. It wasn't a nonprofit, it wasn't official, and Gordon's obit in lieu of flowers send donations to the Gordon T. Heald ALS Fund. So seed money, if you will, came in there. And honestly, Betsy just continued to pay me as though I was taking care of Gordon, as I was out there just creating as I went, right? And I had met a lot of ALS folks, and I knew people were struggling, and I was helping as best as I can. Of course, where do I go to school for that? What more do I need to learn? I'm too old to go to school. And so I was creating as I was going along. And after about a year and a half, 2 years, and through that period, interesting people started showing up in my life. Folks who became teachers, mentors, colleagues, and friends, as I like to say. These were folks who actually just helped me remember what I already knew. But folks who were instrumental in my life, because my background was pretty interesting, had a lot of woundedness growing up and a lot of dysfunction in my own family. And then at the same time, people started wanting tax deductions for donations. Well, here's a glass of lemonade. I'm not a nonprofit. Maybe I should create a nonprofit, right? So with Betsy's permission, out of my own pocket, I created Compassionate Care ALS, which was finalized in 01 or 02. It took a long time because I had all these dreams. And little did I know, when you create a nonprofit, you really want to keep it simple. It's just, you just don't open it up. So anyway, as I said, that was finalized in 01 or 02. Prior to that, I'd hired a gentleman to help me run the organization. He works with small nonprofits and keeps you around for a year, lets you go, shows you the ropes. Well, Ted's been with me for 25 years now. And I hired my first staff person in 2012. So from October 30 of 98, when Gordon passed away, to sometime in 2012, I was an organization of one. You know, I had a Toyota Highlander at that point, I guess. I probably put, when I traded it in, I had close to 400,000 miles on it, maybe shy of 1,000. So I was on the road a lot, and I started creating this organization in an image that that literally evolved in time. We create support, physical support, emotional support, spiritual support. Our model is incredibly unique to any other organization in the country, any other care organization for that matter. You know, it's very much a relational model. You know, everyone's uniquely different. For some folks, we become incredibly close. Others, you know, Ron, thanks for the ramp. We'll call you if we need anything. And, you know, there's nothing in the ALS experience that families find themselves in that there's not something we can lean into. As I said, whether it's physical support, emotional support, or spiritual support, different things for different people. You know, ALS is nothing in life, in my judgment, can prepare folks for such a diagnosis. You know, you receive a diagnosis, and from my perspective, it's incredibly traumatic. And yet, where is that support? You know, people go into the doctor's office and you receive it, and then you have to walk out into a waiting room. And I mean, I can't imagine. And so one of the things we're able to do is offer that support. Now, when I meet someone, I'm the founder and CEO of this organization, and yet my census is larger than any of my team I run an organization, but I'm intimately involved with many, many, many of our families. And one of the first things I do my best to do is to remember, is share with folks, listen, I'm not here to tell you what you don't want to know. I say that because some folks don't want to know anything. Fewer people want to know everything, and most are somewhere in the middle. Art of language is really, really important. It's about honoring people where they are. People are in such different circumstances. You know, when I meet families that have the capacity to navigate all the complexities of living with ALS, quite frankly, if I think about it, I've never met a family that was capable of navigating all the complexities at all. And yet some think they are, and okay, that's fine. You know, for us, for myself personally, I'm happy to walk along folks as much or as little as they wish. And again, it's about honoring them where they are. And what I can tell you, because what we see is an abundance of suffering. You know, to navigate something like this is extraordinary. And so some families, there's already dysfunction within the family. I mean, imagine a family, maybe there was, you know, and we see this too often, a relationship that's, you know, on the rocks to begin with. And then someone is diagnosed, okay, we're going to stay together. It just makes it that much more difficult oftentimes. And then sometimes, you know, it's incredibly hard to know what to prepare for. And, you know, all the physical realities of ALS, where ALS can take individuals along with their families. So, and our work is as much for the caregiver as it is for the person living with ALS. I often am asked, do you have a list of things that we can look at? I mean, we're incredibly connected to the Healy Clinic at Mass General Hospital. And we're connected to Columbia Hospital in New York City. We've got some really beautiful partnerships that we work with. And sometimes, whether it's PTs or OTs or doctors or even folks living with ALS, where do you have lists of things? I don't do lists. Lists are not my favorite thing at all. I mean, you know, this organization was based on, you know, Gordon and I receiving this information from these other organizations. Here are all these lists. And Gordon wasn't interested, right? And so, because everyone's uniquely different, we saw this list of things and it's like, my God, what do I need these things for? So the importance of honoring people where they are is not understated. Incredibly, incredibly important. You know, there's folks who have little ones, children, whether they're newborns, 3, 5, 7, 15. And, you know, that's a huge part of some of the chaos folks find themselves in. What do we do with this? How do we approach our children? And, you know, I'll often ask Ron, do you know therapists that we can reach out to? And so we have a few people in our organization, psychiatrists, psychologists, trauma specialists, who are absolutely extraordinary at what they do. From my perspective, none better in the world. People who I've known for years and years and years. I know their work. And of course, they're on Zoom, several on the West Coast, some are in Colorado. And, you know, one of the big issues here that oftentimes even a lot of folks in healthcare don't have the realization of is the elephant in the room is mortality. You're diagnosed, and here's a doctor telling you have a fatal diagnosis. And again, that's pretty traumatic. And so when folks are looking for, quote, therapists, and I don't like using the word because it makes it sound like, you know, something's wrong with you if you have to go to a therapist. Well, there's nothing wrong. It's just like we need support. And in my judgment, my opinion, whether it's neurologists, whether it is therapists, anyone in healthcare. If they're not comfortable with their own mortality, if they're not willing to do their own inquiry, how do they show up as best as they can for the person that they've just given this diagnosis to, or someone who's been living with a diagnosis? So the importance of our own self-inquiry into our own mortality, and this goes for me and it goes for each of us on this Zoom call. You know, I spend a great deal of time around end of life. You know, after 30 years in my own background, I'm incredibly comfortable with it. And yet with ALS, oftentimes it can be a very fast progression. And yet, like my friend Mariah Fenton Gladys, who is an incredible Gestalt therapist, Mariah lived for 37 years with ALS. Hello. You know, I'm a big believer in stories. And so when I meet folks, I will often share Mariah's story. So I get goosebumps when I talk about her. She's one of the most extraordinary humans I've met. And I've met some incredible people in the years I've been doing this work. But Mariah was diagnosed with ALS, told she had a 10% chance of living for 2 years, advised, and I'm not a fan of the word advise. My definition of advice is me telling someone what I think they should do. I'm not interested in that, but I offer counsel. For me, this whole organization is based on the way of counsel, right? You know, what does it mean to say yes to something? What does it mean to say no to something? Self-exploration. But anyway, Mariah diagnosed, told she had a 10% chance of living 2 years, advised, told, don't have kids. So she goes home, locked herself in a room for 2 weeks. Her to-be husband, Ron, would literally leave meals at the door for her. She became her own client. She did her own deep dive, did her own inquiry. 2 weeks go by, Mariah comes downstairs, finds Ron, says, honey, we're going to live our life. Ron says, great, let's live. Well, Mariah lived for 37 years. She birthed 2 sons. So a couple of years back, I was sharing Mariah's story with someone. Husband said to me, Ron, that's false hope. I said, Dave, I hear you, but it happened. How can it be false? It happened. So, you know, often I'll meet people, and again, the elephant in the room, to be able to discuss it, Ron, what is all this going to look like? Right? And oftentimes when people receive their diagnosis, all our doctors just aren't equipped to hold those conversations. And again, so that's the importance of walking alongside folks, honoring them where they are, knowing they don't have to figure things out on the by themselves. Because along the way, there's lots of questions, lots of decisions, because things are going to come up. And like I've shared with folks, I'm not attached to any choice or decision that you make. You know, if I'm attached to anything, you have all the information to make conscious choices, conscious decisions. You know, what does it mean to say yes to something? What does it mean to say no? And the big ones, of course, in the world of ALS, it's about breathing and swallowing, right? Those are the key components. And obviously, unfortunately, along the way, people lose the ability to use their limbs. You know, the very, very extreme, and to this day, Gordon's experience was probably the most extreme case of ALS to this day that I've still witnessed. I've seen people close, but it took Gordon to the place where he couldn't move at all. He literally lost his speech first and eventually lost his hands, his arms, his legs. Gordon never became completely locked in. Cognitively, he was still available. And yet, you know, early on, we had to figure out how we communicate. 1997, 98, technology wasn't available. And if it was, Gordon wasn't interested. So for us, one blink was a yes and nothing was a no. And as a caregiver, and even though I was a paid caregiver, it got really hard because Gordon was incredibly active. He was like the mayor of West Falmouth. People were in and out all the time. And I was his translator. And of course, people would come in and Gordon would get tired. He has his reclining chair and oops, time to take a nap. You know, so for folks having to navigate just daily living can be really, really hard. But getting back to what does it mean to say yes? What does it mean to say no? All right. You know, feeding tubes are a choice and decision people need to make. Invasive ventilation, tracheotomy, that's the biggest one people are confronted with because eventually, if you lose the ability to breathe, what are you doing? You know, there's BiPAP machines, you know, external ventilation like a CPAP machine. But eventually, and some folks become 24/7 on those, right? And when that's not enough, the only other choice is to have a tracheotomy. Now, along the way, there are a few people that will say yes to it and will actively pursue that. And yet it is such a game changer. And again, I give counsel. I never direct people. I never say you should do this or you should do that. Here's the information. This is what I know as a lay person, as having seen so much of what this can look like. And again, everyone doesn't have the capacity to navigate all of this. Gordon chose not to have a feeding tube. He is incredibly clear. You know, from his youth, he didn't like doctors, hated hospitals. And so in Gordon's case, and I'm a firm believer in stories because stories can share with people. And of course, I would share stories early on. Some of the people in healthcare would look at me because I'm talking about Gordon and my friend John Emmett. The world was a much more genteel place prior to HIPAA. That's just my judgment. Okay. And so anyway, early on, Gordon lost the ability to swallow, and it took him forever for him to allow me to feed him because he was incredibly independent, incredibly stubborn, right? But finally, when he did, it just became incredibly normal. Gordon never stopped living his life. He had me, and it was all physical. 6'4" man, right? And I remember swallowing started to become really difficult. And Gordon's watering hole, if you will, for 30 or 40 years was a place called the Silver Lounge in North Falmouth, prime rib night every Thursday. And every Thursday I had Gordon there, even when he couldn't move. Again, all physical. And on this particular Thursday night, piano bar, myself and some of the folks that worked for him, and the staff knew him well, so they would cut the food up really, really small. But he couldn't keep it down. Napkins were literally piled up to here. So I'm looking up at him and I'm going, Gordon, is this it? And he's like, I said, well, let's see what happens in the morning. So morning comes, I gave him some, it's a baby dessert, Burple or something like that. He could not keep it down. And I was like, wow. And Gordon, as strange as it sounds, okay, this is where we are. So in Gordon's case, he ended up passing away several weeks later. He couldn't eat, couldn't drink. And what I learned back then, and as the years continued on, what I remembered in Gordon's circumstance is it would have been no different had Gordon consciously chosen to stop eating a month or 2 or 3 months prior. It would have been the same process as his inability to swallow. My point in sharing that is one of the big pieces people face for some is at what point does the quality of my life no longer serve me? Again, we're dealing with mortality here. And over the years, I've known many people. We're in Massachusetts. We're not a medical aid and dying state. And for some people, the only way to do that in Massachusetts would be to stop nutrition. And of course, you say that, I say that. Oh, God, that's starving to death. I said, excuse me? No, it's not. And yes, you're stopping nutrition, but in my opinion, everything that I've seen, and I fasted for 4 days, 4 nights before, so I know what the hunger aspect potentially look like, is that the body is already slowing down. Now, I don't have the data to back this up, but if I did, it would probably tell me that the vast majority of the people, hunger diminishes over time. So when people can get to that point, I mean, starving, no. And of course, sometimes, well, that's suicide. Excuse me? No. The quality of my life no longer serves me. Right? And I mean, these are conversations I have often. And again, I'm not directing and I'm not advising. As an example, some years back, this lovely lady had bulbar onset. The disease was really progressing. She was miserable. I don't want to do this anymore. Her daughters would call me. I would have conversations. And of course, she was contemplating fasting. And yet her husband was absolutely not. No, I mean, it was a lot of chaos in this household. So along the way, the daughters come, could you please come talk to our father? I went, okay. So I get there and I'm looking at mom, and through no voices, I know I don't want to do this anymore, Ron. So I look at her husband, and I mean, at this point, she wasn't even on hospice. We were having a conversation. Does it not make sense at hospice at this point? Which is another, I'll touch into hospice in a minute. And just through conversation, I was able to ask him, Jim, would you say that Betty is suffering? And it was like, Ron, how could you ask such a question? Of course she's suffering. And I looked at him and I said, well, you know, Jim, why do you want to see her suffer more? Hello. And I prefaced that because I'm always mindful in conversations with Jim. Can I ask you a question? Of course you can, Ron. That's why I said, would you, as I navigated that terrain, would you say that she's suffering? And so that kind of like, oh my God, yeah. Right. You know, living with ALS, along the way, it can get to a point where we're blind to what is going on. We become used to what it is, even amidst the incredible chaos, the suffering, the extraordinary circumstances people find themselves in, which does not mean there cannot be incredible joy and beauty along the way. And again, everyone doesn't have the same capacity and wherewithal in navigating all this. And yet some people do. And oftentimes, amidst the chaos and the suffering, you're having a bad day, another bad day, and another bad day. But then all of a sudden, things get back to normal. Right? I remember staying in this lane for a few minutes. My good friend Jim Lester. Jim was on the first American expedition to Mount Everest in 1963. First time I met this man, I knocked on the door. I had no idea who it was. You know, I knock on doors. We do intake, but I have no idea what I'm walking into, right? So I walked in, and there's all these photos on the wall, and I'm stunned. They're real photos. You could tell the paper, Kodak, right? Developed in the back room or something, okay? And Jim is sitting off into the living room, white bearded gentleman. He says, Ron, come sit. I said, whoa, not till you tell me what I'm looking at here, because I was really floored. All these photos. And he starts laughing. He's come sit, I'll tell you. And I sit, and he tells me these were porters and Sherpa already in Nepal. when he was there in 63 or whenever it was, 63, 64. And there must have been 700. They didn't have helicopters back then. They were trekking things to the base camp. So anyway, I'm sitting there with Jim. And first question out of this man's mouth, very first. Hey, Ron, what do you know about helium? Excuse me? Helium? Balloons? I don't know. What are you talking about? He says, well, my dear friend who had inoperable brain cancer ended his life with helium. And I went, Jim, I don't know anything about it. I'm thinking Kevorkian. I don't know. He said, what do you know about fasting? That I know a lot about. So we talked about it and I shared. Jim was 80, 81 years old. And he just looked at me. He said, I'm not interested in going where this can potentially take me. Fair enough. Incredibly clear. So anyway, Jim was still pretty functional and just an extraordinary human being. I mean, just extraordinary. And he met his wife. She was a stewardess on Pan Am when he left Nepal. That's where they met. He was an author. She was an author. Her kids were authors. Just extraordinary family. And so I remember his daughter was getting married the following year in September. And he was really clear. I'm going to stop eating after her wedding in September. And so I got a phone call in January or February of that year that September was to follow. And it was from his wife, can you come over? And I could hear the tension in her voice. So I get over there. Daughter was there visiting from Japan. And you could cut the tension with a knife. So I go in, I sit, I'm looking at the ladies, they're over here, they're like pulling their hair out. I'm looking at Jim, and he said, I'm over here, Ron. I said, what's going on, please? He said, I decided to stop eating. I said, yeah, no great news, right? Yeah, in September. No, now. I'm looking over at the ladies, and I said, okay, why? Well, my daughter's here now. So what does that got to do with anything? So I'm just being quiet, just feeling into what's going on. And he didn't like my silence. And I looked back over at him. I said, well, she can always come back. Well, yeah, but it's expensive. I said, well, money is not an issue here. Stop. I mean, I knew him really well. We were friends. And so more silence because I'm kind of feeling into what's going on here. And then finally, he's looking at me. I said, Jim, are you wanting me to tell you what I think? He said, yes. I said, well, you're not going to like what I'm going to tell you. And he goes, okay. I looked at him and said, you're setting your daughter up for an incredible guilt trip. You're telling her because she's here, you're going to stop eating? Really? And so 6 months from now, she can say, well, Daddy decided to stop eating because of me? No. He went, oh, I didn't think of that. So I looked at him. I said, I'm guessing the last couple of days you've had a few hard days. He went, yeah. Let's see how you feel tomorrow. So, okay. Tomorrow came, he felt better. Next day came, he felt better. He didn't wait till September, but it was maybe 3 or 4 months later, and he put things together in a very appropriate way. Sometimes folks are going to have really horrific days because this can get incredibly hard. When you think about it, you have a couple living with ALS 24/7. We do some really beautiful gatherings, Lewis support groups. For instance, we do a Men of ALS gathering. And I remind these men, there's 25, 30 men from all over the country, all walks of life, all different backgrounds. And I remind them every time, because often there's new men on this gathering that we do, is that none of you can possibly really know what this other man next to you is going through or across the screen. Now, there's commonality for sure. You all have ALS. There's physical ramifications that can be similar, et cetera, et cetera. But each of you come from different places, have different beliefs, were raised in different ways, different religions, right? So I really invite you, I would never say to anyone, I know how you feel, because it's impossible to know that. Same thing with the caregivers. You have two individuals living with this disease 24/7. So aside from the whole physical ramifications of it and the physical toll it can take on a caregiver, energetically, you're living with this 24/7, right? You wake up to it, you go to sleep with it. And so the support that we get is crucial. And a lot of people don't have any support. And imagine again 24/7 in a fractured relationship, for goodness sakes. Yikes. Or when there's 2 children, 3 children, 4 children, 5 children. Again, all those choices and decisions. And so what we're able to do, our work, honestly, is about enhancing quality of life, helping folks navigate all the things that can potentially come up, right? Again, physical, emotional, spiritual. We're able to offer folks a great deal of durable medical equipment that is not covered by insurance. I'm not a fan of plastic, because that's metaphorically speaking what you get through our system. So we spend a lot of money on very, very high end things that enhance quality of life. Oh, that's cool, because you're not going to find it anywhere else. And for me, I'm able to go into homes, kind of look around, do assessments, what do you need? And yet at the same time, what's important is just taking notes. Everyone doesn't want to go there. Everybody doesn't want to know what do I need? Because if I have to look at what do I need, it's kind of like going into a home and maybe the gentleman is not moving around really well, right? And I'm assessing, and we're talking about, I like to get to know who people are, but then maybe I'll say, well, have you fallen? Yeah, a couple times. Well, if you've been falling, well, maybe it's time for a walk or a wheelchair or something like that, right? And have you considered this or that? We get a lot of calls oftentimes from PTs and OTs that Mr. Jones needs this or this or this. Well, first of all, I know Mr. Jones, and he doesn't want this, this, or this. He's not ready for it yet. I know what the book says and what you say, he needs it, but he doesn't want it. Then, of course, maybe he needs this, but that's not going to work in his house. So that's why we go in and see, and in a really, really good way, because oftentimes people aren't ready for certain things. I was in a home some years back, and the wife warned me, husband didn't want to know anything. Husband had ALS. I get to the door, knocked on the door, I go in, and he reminded me, Ron, I don't want to hear any of this. I don't want to know anything. I said, okay, I'm going to talk to your wife. So we're sitting over here, and he's sitting over here. And she's sharing with me, and I'm listening. And then he interrupts. He said, listen, Ron, my friend Joe said I needed her around. Why? Excuse me? And I repeated it. I said, okay, can I ask you a question? And he said, of course. I said, when I walked in, you said you didn't want to know anything. Now, are you asking me why you need a ramp or might need a ramp? There's all sorts of things that we get from folks, right? And oftentimes, well, I'm not ready for it now. I'm not ready for it now. And what we'll do is send links. Some people aren't even ready to look at links to see what this looks like. That way we know what it is when you want it. Because far too often people will call in a state of chaos. I need something in the moment. When we talked about it months, or we brought awareness to it, could have been in the garage. So, I mean, some folks have what I call a 4-car garage. Alrighty. And I don't mean for cars, right? So for different types of wheelchairs. There's a lightweight manual wheelchair that weighs 19 pounds. There's a foldable electric wheelchair that weighs maybe 40 pounds. You got your walkers, and then you got your real deal wheelchairs. So it's a gradual place. You go with this, and maybe you have several, if you have the two or three of them and somebody comes over, they can't lift this one, but your friend can lift a 19-pound. It's about allowing people to live their lives, honestly, with dignity. Again, it's about enhancing quality of life, helping people navigate all the complexities of what this disease can look like. Communication, obviously, many people lose their voice. Everyone doesn't lose their voice. All this can look uniquely different. So when I'm sharing with folks, I'm trying to take some of the edges off, trying to take a lot of the fears away, trying to remind them, please don't go online. There's a lot of drama in the world online, tons of it, and a lot of, in my opinion, misinformation. This can look uniquely different. That's why I share Mariah's story when it's appropriate. I have no idea how this is going to look in the moment. Now, of course, as time goes on, I can maybe have a sense of maybe where it's going. And I just don't tell people where I think it's going. If they ask me, alrighty, or if they're having a conversations thinking about, well, my swallowing's getting difficult, my doctor started talking about a feeding tube, yada, yada, yada. And I'll look at them, would you like to know what I know? Rather than tell people what I know, I'm asking permission. Would you like to know what I know about that? The art of language, incredibly important. People are already scared to death. So to be able to walk alongside with them, if I'm attached to anything, then what I do, and hopefully as an organization, what my staff of 33 does, is bring some calm guidance and awareness into people's lives, right? Because things have changed. And yet I still am hopeful my folks, my families can live their lives and amidst the change and find quality of life amidst the change. Because again, all of this can look uniquely different. Again, communication, whether it's verbal or with hands, we have an incredible communication team. And we also interface with Children's Hospital that's got a great augmented communication program. Another organization out of New York called Bridging Voice, which is extraordinary. Technology is all over the place. So I have people that understand that. Likewise, navigating the world of insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, it can be overwhelming for people. So we have incredible folks that can help people navigate all of that, right? We have a van program where we can loan vans to folks for a weekend or a week. We've given probably 15 vans away to folks. That's not on my website. There's a lot we do that's not on my website. It's impossible to do that. But, over the years, vans or people might donate a van to us. Ron, can you find a home for it? And say, bless you, thank you, sure. So we register it, we pay the insurance, and we find a family that can use it till they don't need it. Then we get it back, we get it fixed up, and we find another family. And, again, it's can't give one to everybody. We don't have that. It's just when things happen, wow, okay. It's always made sense when something like that came our way and the right family shows up for it, We do a great deal of gatherings in lieu of support groups. Respectfully, I'm not a fan of support groups, which doesn't mean there's not value in support groups. A lot of people find us because of support groups. We just do things differently. What I found with Gordon, and as years pass, unless your support groups are facilitated well, people are holding space well, and oftentimes too many people are giving advice and trying to fix things. There's nothing to fix here. So in our gatherings, we practice the way of counsel, which is about deep listening, which is about holding space, which is about being present. No you shoulds, right? No crosstalk. It's an opportunity to get real. For instance, Men of ALS gatherings, which I co-facilitate. There's men from across the country, 20 to 30, opportunity to share what's happening in the moment, what's real, in a safe space. No judgments, no advice, just being seen, held, metaphorically speaking, seriously held, right? And when we do that, people become incredibly authentic, incredibly real. And when there's authenticity, there's room for vulnerability. And it can be incredibly extraordinary. Be witnessed by all these men, witnessing other men in these extraordinary circumstances. And sometimes there's men who are caregivers, which adds a whole nother component, because these men living with ALS can then listen to a man who's a caregiver, and it can reflect and mirror some of the experiences that he's having. I sometimes meet folks, men or women living with ALS, who become incredibly stuck and stubborn. Very stuck and very stubborn. Sometimes to the point where there's extreme emotional abuse, which in some ways can be more difficult than physical abuse, where the caregivers are beaten, battered, and bruised. Unfortunately, I see this sometimes. It's not the norm, but trust me, it happens way too often. And whether the relationships was in a difficult place pre-ALS, or maybe ALS has been going on so long that I can't do this anymore, whether it's him or her, regardless. And it's heartbreaking. Sometimes we go in and become facilitators, you know. Everyone doesn't have the capacity to be a caregiver, just like everyone doesn't have the capacity to navigate the world of living with ALS. And so, again, to be able to walk in and bring some calm, guidance and awareness into people's lives is, it's important. But to know how to do that, to be able to recognize and to also get out of the way, you know, because this is their journey. And again, just to be able to bring some guidance and some calm into the circumstance, and maybe some directions. How do we learn to look at this in a very, very different way? And at the same time, again, there can be incredible chaos amongst families. Again, the whole idea of choices and possibilities is often something that's lost on folks, because people don't know the choices that are in front of them, unless sometimes it's presented. You know, again, whether it's a feeding tube, whether it's a tracheotomy. Again, how do I learn to live my life differently as the challenge people face? How do I learn to live my life differently? It's not that you're not going to live. And we can share with you, this is how you can do this, right? Likewise, on my website, and if you haven't explored it, I would invite you. And, you know, Bill, I'm happy to send you and Doug links to a lot of things. Our Colorado kickoff is there. We opened in Colorado many years ago. And we did a presentation to the ALS community. You meet a woman named Brenda Fox who's introducing me. It's a wonderful place to just see who we are, what we're all about, right? I send this to every new family I meet. You know, the only good thing from COVID was Zoom. And that's why we got so busy. So we have a census of over 1,600 families across the country. We work with families, obviously, Mass and New England's our home base. But we have families in every state across the country and many countries around the world. And because of Zoom, we're able to really reach people everywhere.
Ron, is it possible for me to break in with a question or two?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
I think we've all been sitting here mesmerized by your philosophy of life and philosophy of care, which is why I have never experienced this group going a full hour without asking questions, and a testimony to the power, I think, of your philosophy of life. But if possible, I'd like to learn a little bit more about the organization, and maybe one way to get at it is, as you've been speaking, you mentioned how you approach things, my website, and then a lot of other times you say, and we do this and we do that. Can you say anything about how there's got to be more people working with families than just you individually? What's the process been for um, finding the people that can do it like you do, or maybe that extends into your philosophy of care? Doesn't have to be like I do it, but here's here's what people do in my organization. How do we leverage what you're bringing?
Of course. We have a staff of 33. I have 5, 6, 7 liaisons, senior care liaisons to liaisons. We do a lot of training already. Again, the model that's been created here is a relational model. And I've introduced to my team the trainings that I've gone through in my life. So we have incredible resources around those trainings. And, my biggest wish is that all my staff can do things as I do them, but we're all individuals. They all have their own special ways of being. What I appreciate about my team is when they're confronted with a circumstance that they don't know, they reach out to me. All righty. Because to me, the biggest no-no is talking about something that you don't know anything about.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay not to know. And sharing it with a family. There's times I said, well, I don't know. Let me check with one of my staff. Right? Because the material is so important. It's just, no, let's just bring what we can. Bring all of yourself to that circumstance. And I've got an incredible team of folks. Aaron, my first hire, Aaron McDonald Lajeunesse. I've had 3 marriages in my organization over the years where through other resources, it's been pretty neat. Erin is a social worker. She was in foreign adoptions. I met her through one of my families. Her brother had worked for her that I was real close with the family. And Erin's been with me since 2012. And Eileen Gary has been with me about 9 years now. She actually had worked with the ALS Association and has a military background in social work, etc. So I've got some extraordinary folks. And we do continuous trainings with our people. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, I mean, it at least begins to address it.
And then we have we have a speaker series, which is on our website, from neurologists to psychologists to trauma specialists to functional medicine doctors to spiritual teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And which is we do one a month, and it's on our website. My staff, if there's a workshop that they're interested in, they bring it to my attention, and oftentimes I'll send them. Many of my teachers I've introduced to my team. Mariah, I brought up here. Mariah's been gone for 10 years now, but her husband and I are still incredibly close. I brought her up. She's an incredible teacher and did in-service with my team. So I've done a lot of in-services in the world of hospice, and some of my team will assist me in that. So I expose them to all that I know. And yet what I've learned is everything that I brought and everything that I bring, all my staff doesn't buy into it 100%. But they're all good people and they do good work. And it wasn't long ago, all of my new hires, anytime, this is what you need to read. These are the things you need to look at. We have an incredible volunteer program, and it's not just running errands for someone. In our volunteer program, there's every 2 weeks we meet. There's about 8 books you have to read. You need to look at the entire website. You need to know who we are and what we are all about, right? There's some wonderful material on my website. Conversations with Ron was pretty neat. There's one with my buddy Rainier DeBeer. It was kind of like coffee time Saturday morning. We're Zooming, right? Recording. And along the way, I asked Ren, who are you before ALS? And oh my goodness, see where he goes. It's extraordinary. There's another conversation with an extraordinary woman. It's subtitled because her speech is a little diminished. I believe she was a birth doula. It's a while ago, but anyway, she's talking about her children and the end of her life. It's absolutely extraordinary what she shared. So there's incredible education on our website. All right. And I'm always hopeful my staff goes back to it and watches, right?
Mhm.
You know, again, Dr. Scott Eberly, a hospice medical doctor, wrote an extraordinary book called The Final Crossing, which is about a man named Stephen Foster, one of my teachers, mentors, him and his wife, Meredith Little. They brought rite of passage work to this country in the 70s. They worked with at-risk youth and would take them into the desert and fast with them. Then, of course, they needed to make a living, so they worked with adults. But they worked with indigenous communities all over the world. And Scott was part of one of their programs, and Stephen had a terminal illness, a lung condition. He was his hospice medical doctor. He wrote this incredible book about it. And within the book, there's a paragraph there where Scott talks about bringing all of myself to Stephen's bedside. All of myself, including things I might not be comfortable with, like a nurse, chaplain, I mean, yada, yada, yada. And so it's about bringing all of ourselves to that circumstance. And most importantly, being incredibly present, really seeing people. Learning to be okay and not knowing. Learning to be okay in silence. Because sometimes we think we have to talk. We have to hear ourselves because we're uncomfortable. It's being comfortable within that silence, you know? So those are the things, some of the things that are incredibly important in showing up for people, because you're tending to folks in an extraordinary circumstance.
I don't know whether this is a question or an observation I have, but they say a good sermon is one where I don't know who the minister might have thought they were talking to, but as you're hearing it, it relates to your life. And I mean, we know Bill's son-in-law has ALS. He shared that. I don't know if any the rest of us have ALS experiences. I guess Carrie mentioned one, but so much of what you've said seems to resonate with other major illnesses that folks might face, or honestly, no illness at all, but just human relationships.
It's all the same.
And I guess if there's a question, it would be you've chosen to focus on ALS. Do you see uniqueness there that you don't see? Like, are there things that you do that work particularly well with the ALS community that wouldn't translate? I'm inclined to say no, but I just what you've been talking about just seems so extensible.
If I had a magic wand and a whole lot of money, Compassionate Care ALS would be Compassionate Care America, because everything that we do is relevant to any type of illness or circumstance.
Yeah.
Now, I have, in the many years I've been doing this, have heard from many people that there's nothing worse than ALS. When I hear that, my response is, I hear you, but I don't know that to be true. I've seen Huntington's disease. I've seen other diseases that, I mean, some things are just really, really hard. And obviously it depends on the individuals who are having to navigate all that. Everyone doesn't have the capacity, regardless of what it is. But the model that we've created is relevant to any type of circumstance, any type of illness. I wish I lost my mother in 1988. I think I was 36 or something. I'm 72 now. I wish I knew then what I knew now. Oh my goodness gracious. You know, I'd have been able to truly show up in a different way. And how I showed up was fine. It's what I knew at the time. I was very present and very involved. But I just didn't have the capacity and the knowledge that I have today. And again, what we do, in my opinion, is relevant to any other diagnosis. It truly, truly is. And life in general, you know.
I'm also struck by the very beginning of your talk with us. I mean, if I understand it correctly, you had nothing to do with ALS, nothing to do with this person. You just, because of your approach to life, they somehow felt that you would be receptive to asking for help with a relatively small pragmatic thing. And look what's happened. I listen to that and think, this would make a great high school or college graduation speech when people wonder, oh, what direction is my life? Do I have a plan? Well, how about just being a human being and reacting to what happens?
So I wrote a book. It's called Sacred Bullet. It's out there, Sacred Bullet. And in it, I speak about, I was in Connecticut, and there was a gentleman that I thought about going to see. He was kind of winding down. And I'd been on the road for a couple of days. And I come to the fork in the road. All right. Now I could have made a right-hand turn to go see him. And I said to myself, do I need to do that? All right. And I just kind of felt into my body, do I need to do that? And I said, well, if I need to do that, what's that need that I have? Right? Or do I make a left-hand turn because I've got 8 hours, and if I made a right-hand turn, it'd put another 4 or 5 hours on my ride home. And in that moment, I discerned they're good. I can make a phone call and go left. Likewise, when I get to meet people, I'm always curious how they met. Okay. And so maybe in this case, well, we met at the prom, we met at the dance, we met at the office. I said, well, where were you? You know, in the circumstance that where any of you met anyone in your life. Doug, when you met Sarah, had you not made a particular choice or decision, your life could have been completely different.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that goes for all of us. And, you know, when I was working for Gordon, I saw that circumstance. I had no idea. It's just like, okay, how can I help? Right. And then, you know, will you move in with, excuse me? Hello. And, you know, had I not moved up here from South Carolina, I mean, our whole life is based on that. You know, the decisions and the life circumstances, the things that happened to us when we were children that formed our lives and decisions that we made. But I really believe that, you know, we're born into this world to be of service. It took me a long time to come to that conclusion, but I believe that with all my heart. You know, hopefully to make a difference. And so, you know, if someone said, you know, if they found a cure for ALS, what would you do? I'd keep doing what I do. I'll keep doing this till, okay, I don't want to work anymore. And, you know, hopefully I can make it to 85 or 90. Who knows? You know, I'll just keep doing it.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Our group has been uncharacteristically quiet, which I think, again, is testimony to the power of what you've been saying. But now I see at least one hand, and with your permission, I think if we can open it up to some questions.
I'm good.
Brindley, what have you got?
I just want to say I have had a lot of end of life in my life. And so much of what you've said rings so incredibly true about it being choice and about the families having battles with that. You know, who gets to choose? You'd think it would be the person in the end of life, but a lot of people argue about that a lot, and I'm always amazed at how that happens, and everybody's not a caregiver or not this kind of a caregiver or that kind of a caregiver. So much of what you've said has just rung so true with so much of my experience. And I'm really grateful that you're doing this work. And thank you for being here today and sharing it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brinley. I've seen other people wiping their eyes during this in all the little Zoom windows. I think it just touches so much.
Yeah, I'm sitting in my office. So early on, I had a dream. Gordon had passed, and it was not long. They had a little summer house. Gordon was building their house here. He was adding on to it. He never got to live to see the addition, right? But they had a little summer house. And after he passed, I asked Betsy if one of the families I was working with, if they could come for like a week. And she said, of course. So I ramped it up and all that sort of stuff. And it was like, wow, that was pretty cool. So that inspired me to start dreaming about, wouldn't it be cool to create a center? So long story short, I dreamt into it. And it's a long story how it all unfolded, but I was able to make it all happen. We built a center here in Falmouth. It's a retreat center. It's a bed and breakfast that, I raised $3.4 million to redo. So we've had ALS families from all over the country come here. It's like a retreat. It's like a beautiful place. It gets you to the beach, gets you to here and there and all that. So it's a pretty neat thing. And, if you ever have the opportunity, come down, take a look. It's here in Falmouth. And it's the only place like it in the country. Again, it's just about dreaming, and it's about manifesting those dreams, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, it's pretty extraordinary. My buddy Doug, who had ALS, Doug was on my board, Doug Oakley. And I remember sharing Doug the idea about doing this. And, well, actually, this is another good story. When I met Doug, early on, he said, "You have a therapist I can see?" I said, "I don't have a therapist you can see." I said, "I know this really cool lady who's a nurse practitioner that does some really nice coaching work." He said, "Yeah, let me go see her." So I made all that happen. Doug calls me a few days later. I said, "How'd it go?" He said, "Oh, man, she is awesome, Ron." I said, "When are you going back?" "I don't need to go back." I said, "Excuse me?" You sound like my brother, Doug. One time, I'm done, I'm fixed, right? He said, No, I really got what I need, Ron." I said, "Beautiful." So that was that. Doug and I became fast friends. He joined my board. And I remember we were at the Silver Lounge, Gordon's watering hole, for lunch, Doug and I, one day at the bar. And we're sitting there, ordered lunch. Lunch comes. And I passed him the salt and pepper. And I go about my business. I felt like a knife on my neck after I did that, metaphorically speaking. I turn around and he's looking at me. And he says, "If you ever do that again, I'll knock you out." I went, "Oops." And I knew exactly what he was saying. I passed him the salt. Did he ask me to pass him the salt and pepper? No. But it was a huge lesson that I learned. Before I do anything for someone with ALS, I ask permission. In other words, he could have asked. I was treating him right. Next time we're in there, he's looking around. I said, "Can I pass you the salt and pepper?" He said, "Yes, please." So it's something really, really important, whether it's someone living with ALS or someone else that might be infirmed or there's an issue. I learned always, if I'm in a home, before I do anything, if I want to grab something for someone or they're looking around for the glass of water, I'm going to, can I get you that water? It's really important little lesson. But anyway, Doug was a huge fan of the idea of doing the retreat center. And I had tried it once to make it all happen, and it fell through. And then we brought it to the board, and it all fell through. And sometime later, I guess this is in 2013. I guess it's been that long since Doug's been gone. But anyway, Doug passes away. I'm visiting his wife, Patty, at their home. And sitting there, friends were over, I hadn't seen her in a while. And she comes up, she says, "Oh, Ron, I forgot to tell you that if you were going to do the retreat center and the money we hoped would come in came in, I should give you $50,000. I'm like, excuse me? And I said, are you telling me the money you hoped came in, would come in, came in? She said, yeah. She said, oh, but then I asked Doug, if you weren't going to do the retreat center, can I give it to CCLS anyway? He said, no, it's for the retreat center or nothing. Now, the big backstory on this is I live right around the corner, and I saw a house for sale in the paper, which I was confused because the house was just bought. Had a Bernese mountain dog at the time, Moses. So let's take a walk. I want to go look at this house. So I'm looking at the house, went on the market, and the woman was out in the garden, and I passed her by. I went back to introduce myself to say, hi, I'm your neighbor. She says, your house on the market? She said, no, no, no. Why do you ask? I said, I saw it in the paper. No, that's the one up the street. Then right across the street, she said, the Beach Rose Inn, I think they just took off the market, which is a bed and breakfast that I had housed people here, speakers and some families over the years, right? And I went, wow. So I go home and I call just to say hello. I've got some folks who want to stay there. And before we hung up, I said, by the way, if it's ever on the market, let me know. So she said, well, we just took it off the market. I said, can I come look at it? She said, sure. So not that I can do anything, just curious. So I did, and I looked at it, and I go, wow. And it was that night or the following night, I can't remember, that Patty shared that story with me. So anyway, after she shared that with me, I didn't say anything. I go home, I ponder all this. Do I want to take this on, right? So I called her next day, can you come on over? And she said, sure, came over. So let's take a walk. Where are we going? I said, don't worry about it. 5-minute walk. So we're standing in front of the Beach Rose Inn. She said, what are we looking at? I said, it's on the market. She said, really? She said, did you know that last night when I talked to you about Doug's 50,000? I said, yeah, but it was just kind of too surreal. And she said, well, I guess we're doing the retreat center. You got your first 50. It's just, but this is a place that has seriously impacted people's lives in a very positive way. So, yeah, our programming is unique. And along the way, questions, thoughts, concerns, and Bill, by all means, reach out to me anytime. Okay, seriously. And again, your daughter, Laura, is equally as important to us, as Alex. Anything else I can share? Any questions?
Yeah, Carrie.
Yeah,
Sorry, I was about to raise a hand.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, first of all, Bill, I didn't understand or didn't know that I could see the pain and anguish in your eyes, this whole time. I just want to show this is a picture of my friend Jerry that I spoke of. She was and there's a picture, this is a picture of her on her birthday in October 2013 when she turned 60. And she died about 3 months after that picture was taken. You could just see the joy and happiness in her voice. She, my understanding is that you don't so much diagnose somebody with ALS as you rule out a number of other diseases. And I remember I still have it on my old voicemail recorder when you use the cassette tapes, Yeah. And you could see from the kindness in her face, she was not a vulgar person. Her voice message said basically to the effect that they ruled out all these other possibilities. Well, I've gotten the confirmation. Ain't that a fucking mind blower is what she said, And then, as I mentioned earlier, my then girlfriend and I got two of the few people that really she would welcome into her life, because it was just, it was so hard to watch her. She couldn't do really anything but mumble. I met her at Leslie when she was getting her graduate master's degree in education. I was in a couple classes with her there. So just an incredible person, but it's all, it's just
one of the
a wretched
challenges-
disease.
Yeah, and one of the challenges, sometimes they have to rule out everything. And I still don't understand all that, because sometimes they diagnose it like that. So, I've never really been 100% clear, but yeah, often they're having to rule this out. Where did your friend live? Where did she live?
Well, they lived on Beacon Street, just south of Kenmore Square. Her late husband, or not late, her husband, Peter Kramer, started a company that went public, ironically called Zoom Telephonics, that sold modems. It was a big enough company back in the modem days that it bought Hayes Modem Company.
Wow.
They bought a beautiful, well, a 5-story walk-up brick on Beacon Street, as I say, that needed a lot of TLC and just turned it into a masterpiece, And Peter paints now, and I won't describe that. He's just phenomenal. He's a museum quality thing. So they live in Brookline.
What was Jerry's last name?
Kramer with a K.
With a K?
Yeah. So Jerry passed away on January 10th, 2014 from complications related to ALS at the far too young age of 60. Oh. Jerry lived her life with a remarkable, endearing combination of sophistication and wonder. She found joy in nature, music, food, mystery stories, crosswords, whimsy, and other things. But so, and Bill, I feel what you're going through. Even more so.
Yeah, I'm just curious if.
How long was your the diagnosis, Bill? And you're on mute.
There we go. Alex noticed the first symptom literally exactly on my birthday a year ago. So it's been a year and a couple of weeks. He wasn't diagnosed until the holidays, so October in that area. But and it's been tough. But like I said, the CCALS has been helpful with chairlift and with ramp and just wheelchair, all kinds of support, which is what they need. So, and I think they're getting therapy, but I'm not sure it's with your organization or some other support. But yeah, my daughter's been incredibly strong. I worry about her all the time.
Yeah.
But so far, so good.
Hey, Ron, maybe, and the stories you've shared have touched on some amazingly generous benefactors. I know Bill, actually Bill's grandkids, right? Organized that fundraiser at our church. Are there, what can the community do to help you out? Is it running fundraisers? Is it, are there ways that we can help?
Well, I mean, if you go to our website, we do all sorts of fundraisers. I mean, it's keeping the train going for sure. And again, we do lots of fundraisers, and families do different fundraisers for us. And this year, more than ever, quite frankly. And depending on the size of it, we can help out and all that sort of thing. But again, if you go to CCALS, we got the Falmouth Road Race coming up. We have a really beautiful event coming up in October called Shuck ALS, as in shucking oysters. It's a beautiful event on the Cape. Yeah, and honestly, if you know folks that want to contribute to the world of ALS, CCALS is we've been doing this for a long time. There's a lot of ALS organizations out there. And I'm of the opinion sometimes there can be way too many voices. I remind folks, work with whom you want to work with. I'm just not interested in replicating or duplicating things. And, I'll get the question, what's the difference between you and these other organizations? Well, They might do one or two things we do. We do many things they don't come close to doing. And, our model is uniquely different. Probably 30% of our families come from other ALS organizations. What does that tell you? What tells me they're just not doing what's necessary to help people navigate all of this. And, it's obviously research is very, very important. And yet it just, it's lost on me how so much money goes into the world of research. Thank goodness. And yet, can anyone tell me how all the money spent on research has had any direct impact on the quality of life of anyone living with ALS today, yesterday, last year, tomorrow or next year? Sometimes, yeah, it can bring hope because it might look good, but seriously. And so it's a delicate dance. I just wish more funds could be sent to the world of care and helping people navigate all this, And it's just not the equipment. I mean, some people don't have two nickels to rub together. I've got this beautiful woman in Mississippi. She's got like 2-3 children. And I just heard from her the other day, and just a really lovely lady. So we're helping her out with rent. We pay some utility bills just to make things a little easier for a while. Again, I don't advertise that, right? And I mean, some people, it's kind of like I send a lot of gift cards out to grocery stores so people can eat. I mean, there's all that exists. So it's, and, there are a lot of incredibly wealthy people in the world living with ALS. And, if they're supporting the world of care, I don't know about it, but it's all seems to go to research. There's a disconnect to me there.
Yeah.
But anyway, when I meet families, Ron, what can we do? What can we do? Well, I'm not here for that already. Let's do what we do. But if anybody wants to support the world of ALS, send them our way, So, I mean, it's a fine line. But obviously, I'm grateful to many of our families who've been supporting our work for years, not just as they've been living with ALS, but beyond all of that. So, yeah. And we do grant writing and things of that nature. And grants are hard, and we write some incredible grants. But we've been blessed over the years to have a few folks that really support our work in big ways that allow us to do what we do. So,
yeah. Thanks for that. So it is 10:30. We probably should try to start wrapping up. I see Carrie and Brinley's hands up, so maybe we can hear from them, and then we'll bring things to a close.
Yeah.
Carrie?
I'll be very quick. Yeah. You kind of touched on what the key word was research. And I know early on you said you're not really into research. And I'm echoing what Doug had said earlier, that I've attended many of these Coffee with a Purpose, and I've never seen such a somber group sitting here just listening to every word that you had. And I guess my question was going to be, and I think you answered, is there probably haven't been a lot of advances in terms of, combating this disease, despite all the
there's
money.
some really, really good people working on it. I mean, I'm connected to, fortunately, the folks at the Healy Clinic at MGH, Mass General. Dr. Merit Shakovitz, I've known for 30 years. She's stellar. There's none better in the world. She was Gordon's doctor. And so when I have folks that are interested in research, that's where I send them, without a doubt. And there's some awesome folks. The Healy Clinic, there's not a better ALS clinic in the world. And I mean, Riazal has been on the market. That's been the drug. It's been out there forever. Radicava has been out there. And it's great people early on. And there's a lot of things they're working on, So, just fingers crossed.
Yeah. Thanks. Brinley?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the end of that last part you were talking about is so much, I feel like, where so many families that I know are dealing with end of life for everything. Certainly I dealt with it with cancer and a few other heart-related diseases and such, that the care part is the big part that is missing, the genuine, real care part that you talk about. Everybody is quick. When my sister got cancer, everyone was very quick to say, you know, hashtag F cancer, and we'll give money over here to this research and that research. And it really was it's a hard thing to help remind people. Yeah, but that sometimes what's really just needed right now is just the care, finding the care and the help for the care. And hospice, helping people understand that hospice isn't for the last 5 days, that it's for a lot longer than that, and to accept the help, how to accept that help for care, on top of finding the care for all of the diseases, just for all of it. It's such a thing. And it's really inspiring and heartwarming to hear somebody focused on that part of it. As a person who's gone through it a bunch, I just really, it's such an important focus. And I think so many people forget it. And I did put all of the links that I could find for what you were talking about. Not as many this time as normal, but I did put your website, and MGH and the Healy Clinic, and your book. And I put those in the chat for anybody who's interested. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thanks, Brinley. All right, so Cindy and Bill, and then we'll wrap up. Cindy?
Yeah, so I'm still figuring out how to even word this, Ron, but you said if you had a huge amount of money, you would have compassionate care for anything that anybody needed in America. But suppose and you say you get grants, like if you got like, are you sort of like, are you getting the amount of money coming in that you need to do the work that you're doing? And if you got a huge amount more money now and still were focused on ALS, where would you grow compassionate care for ALS?
So I have a staff of 33.
Mm-hmm.
What I learned long ago is I don't need to have a person in every state, right? I would hire more care liaisons.
Okay.
Our census is such that our staff is really overworked. You can look at the data, how many clients should one particular person have. It's way over the top.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would definitely hire more quality folks.
Okay.
That's what I would do there. And I'm working on another project strictly for caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
We're building another center, much smaller scale, in Boulder, Colorado, just for caregivers.
Wow.
One, for those who've lost a loved one, which is huge. I mean, imagine living with this for years on end, and just a space to be tended to and to be in nature. 6 minutes in one direction, you're in the mountains. 6 minutes in another direction, you're in a coffee shop downtown Boulder. And there's a lot of great modalities of work that we can introduce folks to. Mm-hmm. For those that can't afford it, we would fly them out there. That's the dream, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's underway. We're about a year away, but we've already been hosting people there. We've been renting this place, so it's pretty neat. But again, it's just finding quality folks. I've got several folks. I got 3 staff in Colorado. I've hired someone in South Carolina that's helping with the Carolinas. I've got several people that just Zoom, right? And so, but that's where I would go.
Thank you.
Needing more help, finding the right people.
Thanks, Ron. Bill?
I hesitate to share this, but my son does have a GoFundMe page, and I know Ron just made a passionate plea and is doing wonderful work for many, many people. But my daughter and a friend of hers set up a GoFundMe page, and that's been very successful. But again, maybe I can share that link with Doug, but I didn't want to push it. But you're all friends, and
Yeah.
I feel comfortable sharing that with this group. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please do. Please
The
do,
co-
Bill. Please do
the
share
co-
it.
The costs get so incredibly difficult. I mean, Bill, you mentioned, I mean, I don't know if Alex is still working or not. Families lose income at some point. I'm a huge fan for people to continue to working until they don't want to work anymore or can't work anymore. But income is lost. And what do people do? So I remind people, GoFundMe pages, alrighty. And I mean, I've met people, Ron, what can we do for you? It's like, well, wait a second, do something for yourself first. We'll do what we do, but and GoFundMe is a really good way for some folks to do that. And it's all in the language. I have people, send me what you're writing, because too many people make the mistake of, well, I need durable medical equipment. We're paying for medical expenses. You have insurance, so you don't need money for medical expenses. What people need is in-home care, or if you have children, or if I'm no longer working. So language is really, really important. But I'm really happy, Bill, that they created that, because it can certainly help, so.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, he just went from 100% pay from his very, very generous employer to we're trying a consultancy thing at 10 hours a week, and we don't know whether it's going to work or not, but they've been very generous, and we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, it's a big hit for sure.
And then imagine individuals that don't have a generous employer. You have no idea. It
Yeah.
happens all the time. It's like, you got to be kidding. So,
Right.
so anyway.
So
Yeah.
thank you again, Ron, for coming today.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, thanks so much for being here. Carrie mentioned maybe a somber mood, but again, I think it's just that this touches on so much of our lives, whether we are struggling with ALS in our lives or other things. So again, yeah. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. And anyone questions, feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah.
Ron at
Thank you.
ccals.org is my email. It's pretty easy.
Great.
Beautiful.
So I mentioned at the outset that this is our last session until summer break. We'll take the whole month and Labor Day weekend off and see folks in September. I have a couple of open slots in September, but the one slot that I do have booked so far at the end of the month, actually two slots, but the one at the end of the month, we'll be talking to the Council on Aging about their work in promoting Natick as a dementia-friendly community, which in a sense touches on this, and not ALS, but another thing that happens as part of life and how we can be there for each other, not just as individuals, but as a town. So I'm really looking forward to that discussion. If folks have suggestions for speakers, please continue to route them to me so we can line things up. I've already got Todd and Jeff lined up to walk us through to Fall Town Meeting warrant. It's going to be here before we know it. Brinley, do you have other events people should be focusing on during August? Go watch the dam every day, or what's left of it, right?
I actually do highly recommend going and checking out the dam before it's finished. The process has been quite incredible. I am going to make Greg put them all the pictures into one
Good.
into one file so that I can share that with you guys, because it truly has been amazing to watch. And
I saw him down there the other day when I was down there.
Yeah, I have decided, I know we got to go, but I have decided that in late August or early September, I'm going to put together a group to just show up down there and have a moment of accepting the grief that people are feeling for the loss of the spillway, and then helping to channel that into the joy of the beauty of the river. Because watching what the river's doing and watching the wildlife, the wildlife aren't sad right now. Everybody's still worried about the wildlife, and I can say I've been there enough. They're not sad right now. They've been loving all of the exposure in the newly exposed mud flats to the algae and the bugs and the everything that's in there. And our, the resident heron has not left, still there, and his two buddies show up on a regular basis, and the fish are still there. And anyway, so gonna put that together and see if we can't do some drumming and some acknowledgement of the grief and then letting it go to help find the joy, because I think that's important. I put in the chat a link to the Natick calendar, because for the month of August, I think that's the best way for people to stay up to date for what's happening, because the select board doesn't stop, and Memorial School Building Committee meetings don't stop, and the wonderful events on the Common don't stop. We have 2 this week, one tonight and one Monday, Wednesday, for concerts down on the Common. We'll have one more Natick Nights in August. Excuse me. And so I put all of that in there because I hope to see you guys around town through the month. Oh, and I put, because of the way the calendar is, we won't meet before the primaries, the Massachusetts primaries. And so I would just like to remind everyone, as we're talking about, where money goes, seems like paying attention to how you vote is important for that, because the legislators have a lot to do with grants and funding for things. And our primaries in Massachusetts are September 1st, which is Tuesday. So it'll be a week before we come back on the 7th. Are we going to do Labor Day?
No, that's right. Yeah, we'll take Labor Day off, come back the following.
Oh, okay. So it's a week and a half, almost 2 full weeks before we come back on the 14th. So I did put a link in there. There are a lot of primaries. And so I hope everyone can get registered to vote. You should have all received your "Would you like to vote by mail?" Please don't forget to fill them out if you want a ballot. If you want to vote by mail, because you have to ask for it every year. Just because you did it last year doesn't mean you are automatically enrolled for that this year. So if you want to vote by mail, please register to do that, so you can get your ballots in there. And I hope everyone has a great August.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for all of that, Brinley. And yeah, we will see each other around town, I know. So good. All right.
Ron, I think the dam has been there 200 years, so it's a very big deal.
Not 200, close to 100, but it's still a very big deal.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the current one was built in 1934.
But I mean, the idea of having a dam there for
There have been different dams
Yeah.
since the 1600s.
Yeah.
But,
right.
So anyway, we don't have one almost anymore.
Yeah. Finally got there yesterday. I was out of town for about a week, not on vacation. Came back and saw the paper article saying they was start, removing it, the month of July, and say, oh, I better go take a look. And it was sad to see. I wish I'd gotten pictures at the spillway.
Yeah. Well, we know that
that's
Greg
right.
does. So we got to get Greg to show us his pictures.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
We got to get
Greg. Yep.
Is it also another Ron, the artist in residence down there? We got to get him as well.
Yeah. I think he'd like to come to your visit the dam with you, Brinley, when you do that. He's doing a book on it. I think you heard that last week, so I won't repeat it. Yes. But he's, new wildlife, etc. He's very observant. Yeah. Be a good resource.
Great.
Yeah, great.
Cool.
I'll tell him.
I'm going to go ahead and turn the recording off at this point. At least we can continue to chat. But